Before we get into the video, I wanted to share a special tool that David and I have been using for over 2 years to manage our inventory on Amazon. The tool is called SoStocked, and it is a very powerful tool. It's designed specifically for inventory management. If you're in a physical products business selling on Amazon, you need to be in stock, especially with the inventory restrictions lately. This tool is incredibly powerful. If you're having trouble with inventory management, this might be a tool to help you. SoStocked is partnered with Firing Demand, and they've offered our guests, our listeners, a 30-day free trial. So click the link in the video description to get 30-day free trial. On to the video.
Welcome, everyone, to the Firing Demand podcast. On today's episode, we have the privilege to interview Bear Neuman. Bear is an accomplished digital marketer and author with over 15 years of experience in the industry. Throughout his career, Bear has worked with numerous businesses, ranging from startups to large corporations, with revenues exceeding $400 million. With his expertise in digital marketing, Bear has strategized and implemented custom marketing strategies for hundreds of companies, helping them achieve their goals. We're very excited to have Bear on the podcast today, diving into all things marketing. Welcome to the show, Bear.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it. Really excited to be here.
Absolutely. So to start things off, can you please share with our audience a little bit about yourself and your path to becoming the president and founder of Bear Fox Marketing?
So I got really a lot of enjoyment from learning about SEO and studying it and essentially just online marketing. Really enjoyed it. Got an internal job here locally in Boise, Idaho, doing the keyword research for 53,000 craft products that they were going to be selling. So worked on that project, took me about 9 months. Don't be fooled by the face and the name. I might look like I'm into crafting, but I'm really not. Crocheting's not really my thing, but that's what I got into. So that was my kind of start into SEO, and I loved it. I love seeing the results. I love seeing pages going into the top rankings, customers coming in, finding what they want to find, and really enjoyed it. So I moved from there into running a publishing company, and I managed their SEO, all of their monetization strategies, everything. And when Google did a massive update to its algorithm back in 2012, the business model for that company was no longer viable, and a lot of all their revenues were dependent upon Google organic traffic. And there were so many things that had been adjusted that they wanted to essentially close shop. And instead of getting another company internally, I said, you know what? I've had enough people ask me for my expertise to figure out this whole SEO mystery that I decided to start my own agency. Started there, did it for a few years, and then my business partner, Glenn Moore, we met up, and he was frustrated with his lack of results. He has some bigger brands, and I said, just give me the same budget you have. You're currently paying your agency in California, the big fancy one in California. Let me show you what I can do. He's like, you're on, let's see it. And in a matter of 6 months, I was able to take, he was going up about 10% per year from the previous agency, and they were up to about 6,000 unique visitors organically in Google. I jumped in and took it from 6,000 to 28,000 in about 6 months. That was a little bit of a unique situation, but ultimately I was kind of off to the races. He enjoyed it so much, we decided to team up and form Bear Fox Marketing, and we've been moving forward and having a great time ever since.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks for sharing, Bear, and welcome to the show. Excited to kind of dig into this. I love SEO. I love marketing. For the listeners, can you share with your wealth of experience, taking clients from, 6,000 unique to 28,000? It's a pretty big jump. Can you share with the audience kind of like maybe your high-level formula for a marketing plan for, say, a newer business? What should they be focusing on? What are the things that you would advise them to focus on?
Yeah, so if you're just getting started, I would really focus on the website you have and what you want the visitor to do. So each page should have a function. A lot of times people will come in the kind of spray and pray approach where they just throw up content. There's no research behind it. The fundamental key behind SEO is that it's competition based. And so really, there's only so many spots on that top spot. If you're new, you're not going to be favored by Google. Google essentially doesn't trust you to put you in that spot. So if they put bad websites there, it makes them look bad. So they want to make sure the website is trustworthy. It starts with the on-site content, the site structure, and understanding what it is you want from that page. Do you want them to call you? Do you want them to learn more about your product? Do you want them to buy? Whatever that case might be, and make sure that page is comparable and even better than what your competitors are. So make sure your offering's better, the content is better, the title, the little things, the title tags, meta descriptions, just all the things that go into making a page solid are really high and tight, and you've got a direct purpose behind each page of content that you create.
I've got a follow-up question on that. So you're talking about page health. So to use an analogy, when you go to the doctor, they take your height, weight, blood pressure, these indicators of health. And so when you click on a website or are working on one of your clients' websites, what are those indicators of health?
Yeah, great question. Really, it starts with, I would say, the title tag. And people are like, okay, the title tag simply stated. That bright blue hyperlink when you Google something on Google, the bright blue section that, says what the page is, and then beneath it's the meta description. That title tag, you have about 58 characters that you have to work with, 55 to 58 characters. That is your title tag. That is going to make a huge difference and impact in how Google ranks you and what you're going to be ranking for. So that's really kind of one of the most critical pieces. The next piece is to make sure your meta description is there, it's on point, and then you have to have a certain amount of length and just value to the content. People will say, well, it needs to be 500 words. Well, it needs to be 2,000 words. And my answer to that is yes. Depending on who you're competing against, if you have 2,000 words when all of your competition have 500 and they're ranking number 1 and number 2, you probably don't need 2,000 words. I would focus on understanding who you're competing against and why, what they're doing that already has that top ranking, and make it your own and focus on the value. So you can kind of have your general parameters of how much content should be on this page, what you should be focusing on as far as the keywords being used, but then really understand the purpose of the page and what you want to get from it. But really making sure your title's there, the content is there, it's helpful. So focus on the value that content brings for whatever you're trying to sell. And then ultimately, when we get into, there's a couple different areas. There's the on-site health, and then there's the technical element of a website, making sure it's fast. It can be scanned by Google. I've seen a number of sites that they actually have a fast website, but the programming was done in a way that Google couldn't read it. They actually told Google not to index the page, and so they were never getting any kind of traffic. It was kind of a mess up by their developer, but I see it all the time. So just the fundamentals, making sure you don't have duplicate content. A lot of people will repurpose their content, but it's so close to the initial page that they create that it starts creating duplicates. And so Google gets confused which page it should rank. Is it this one or is it the new one you just updated? And all of a sudden you're competing with yourself, and Google's response is, I don't know which one, so I'm not going to rank either one. And you can kind of shoot yourself in the foot. So there's definitely a list you can go through. Those are the most basic ones, but it can get a little bit technical, but for the most part, SEO can definitely get complicated. Google uses about 220 plus variables in its ranking algorithm. Conceptually, it's really not that complicated. If you kind of do the basic blocking and tackling, shall we say, you stand a pretty good chance of ranking, and not only ranking, but ranking fairly quickly, depending on who you're competing against.
One question that it seems like we can't get through a podcast lately without talking about AI. And so in terms of Google and AI, in our companies, we use AI content for our brands, for the most part, AI with a human touch, I would add. Mm-hmm. And so moving forward in 2024, for anybody using AI content, what do you think is Google ranking them alongside other human written content? Like, what are you saying, and kind of what is your advice to your clients on AI content?
So I love AI. I think it's great. It's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. It's only going to become more and more influential with the content that's being created. That being said, if you're using AI to augment and improve the quality of the content you're creating, you're probably going to be good to go. Making sure it's rich, people enjoy it. If you're using AI to cut corners, it will blow up in your face. Google has been the most aggressive in this past year for its fundamental algorithm updates to combat bad AI content that I've ever seen in any year past. Obviously, it's targeted directly at AI, but their core updates are really getting aggressive. So it's obvious Google can scan a website, and to a degree, it can determine if it was an AI created piece of content. If it flags it as 100% and it's considered low value, Google will not only penalize that page, it will penalize your entire site. And so making sure your content is good across the board is going to be critical, that you're using it to make it better and not to cut corners.
Okay. One last follow-up on that, and then I'll throw it back over to David. Now, if you have a website and you're using AI content, is there a way to go and check somewhere on Google to find out if you've been penalized for that? Or how do you know when you've been other than your traffic goes down, your rankings go down? Other than that, is there a way to know if you have like a checkbox or something on Google somewhere for for being penalized?
Excellent question. Yes, there is. So there's tools out there. There's a lot of tools. My personal favorite is ahrefs.com. They're one of the biggest ones. They've got the second largest backlink database or link database in the world. They're second only to Google. That being said, they're not as big as Google, so they do the best they can to keep up. But you can sign up for even a free account, and you can look at the data associated with your website and your organic traffic. And at the bottom of that graph where they're saying, okay, you've got 1,000 or 10,000, 100,000 visitors, you can see the traffic fluctuations over the past 5 years. And just specifically this past year is what you want to focus on. And they actually have little Google tags across the bottom of the timeline. And if your traffic drop lines up perfectly with one of those massive Google updates, you've been hit.
On Ahrefs, on the timeline, they like tag it with like major core updates or something. And then if you're correlating it with that, okay, fair enough.
And just to throw this out there, if you find that, it's actually a good thing. One of my biggest frustrations is the site's not performing like it should, and I don't know why. Like, is it the title tags? Is it the links? Did someone try and spam us with bad links to try and take us down? Is it the content? Is it not up to par? Like, what is it? It could be, again, dozens or even hundreds of variables. So if I can go and find that in a matter of 15 seconds, pull up my site and see, yeah, it lines up perfect with the Google update, go through and find out specifically what that update was targeting, fix your content, and you should bounce back.
At the beginning of the episode, you had talked about spray and pray, right? Just the lots of media kind of throwing it out and hoping that it works well. I think this is something that a lot of business owners run into when they're getting started. They have a limited marketing budget, and they must ask themselves, where can I put these dollars to work where they're going to work the hardest? And so what digital marketing channels generally produce the highest ROI? And if you can answer this without saying it depends, you get bonus points. Or at least if you say it depends, give some context behind it.
Absolutely. Hands down, SEO and email, believe it or not. Those are really going to be your biggest. If your email's not making close to 50% of your online revenue, you're missing the boat. You really dropped the ball there. So definitely have a good email campaign. And again, you can actually combine the two. So to your question, I'd say those top level are the best channels. However, it also depends on the time frame. So if you need revenue coming in tomorrow, SEO is not going to cut it. And so from a long-term perspective, those are your two biggest channels. From an immediate perspective, you want to focus on something like TikTok or Facebook or potentially LinkedIn, where you can run an ad, set the ad up, turn it on, pay, and you instantly got eyeballs, impressions, traffic coming into your site. And that's going to produce your most immediate ROI.
In your answer, email marketing, to me, that is fairly self-explanatory. You need email addresses and you need content. On the SEO, I would imagine we probably have some listeners out there that have an active website. They may have a couple hundred blog articles. They're asking themselves, am I better off optimizing my existing blog articles and pages, or should I continue to produce more content? And so when they're making that decision, what would be, and I just throw out blog articles, and maybe there's other things to consider, but is there, when someone's faced with that decision, optimize or produce more content, what would be some helpful things to look at?
My vote initially would be to optimize, so not more content. And I have a little different philosophy on this, that what you probably have heard is content is king. Everyone, content is king, more content, more content. I disagree. I would say marketable content is king. And so if you're just producing content to produce content, generally speaking, is probably going to be low quality content. I'd much rather have one piece of really good content that ranks really well, hundreds of pages that actually don't rank very well. So I would focus on that content and make it better. And the truth is, if you have hundreds of blog content, pages of blog content that don't produce any kind of traffic, there's a good chance that content is actually penalizing your website, and you'd see bigger jumps in traffic by selecting which pages to deactivate and actually get rid of. Google will see kind of more of a focus. The content's gone. And with these algorithm updates, one thing to take into account, I've seen multiple instances of this, where if you have 100 pages of content and 20 of the 100 are really good, you got great traffic coming in, the other 80 are just kind of there, they're not really doing much. You created the content, so you leave it up on your website. Those 80 pages can actually get your other 20 penalized, and you can lose ranking for that. So that when I talked about how aggressive Google is with its ranking algorithm, it's going through and finding all the content on your site. And if it's deeming that a lot of the content isn't quality, they actually penalize the entire site. And in the past, they've never done that. They've done more on the actual pages and would lower them down. Now the site itself is getting hit.
Have you worked with clients where you'll go in and your recommendation is delete this content?
Absolutely. Yep.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. And you hear content is king across the board. So deleting content seems counterintuitive, but that's if you were going in, deciding to make recommendations on what pages to delete. Is there a certain line that you would draw? Would you say, where's 80% of my traffic coming from? Or where would you draw that threshold for deleting content below that?
I would first start looking at what pages you have that don't have any traffic coming in at all. That's really the biggest indicator. And before I would cut them, I would ask, why is it not getting any traffic? Is it because Google has it de-indexed and isn't even willing to serve it up? Is there something wrong with your site that is preventing Google from indexing it? A lot of what we call 3-1 redirects, one page to another page. You have too many of those. Like, is there something structurally wrong with your site that makes Google not want to rank it? And if the answer is no, everything's fine, Google just doesn't want to rank it, then I would start there. I would start cutting those pages, and you can, save the pages to repurpose later, but I would start cutting, and you can do it in a systematic way. So if there's 100 pages and you find that 30 of them have no traffic, and see what happens to your site. Depending on when Google scans your site, you should see results within really a couple of days, potentially a couple of weeks. The reason SEO is difficult to say a specific time frame is Google deliberately delays any results that you get to see in the SERPs so that you don't know what it is you did exactly that made it jump up. So Google is combating bad websites as well as SEO professionals that can really dial in and kind of know the ins and outs and crack the code. And so they're really trying to keep a good product while combating the spammers and not revealing their secrets about what you exactly should be doing to make your site dominate.
Interesting. So I want to dig into that a little bit more before we pivot. And one is, what is there a traffic? Is there like, I guess, a low threshold? You said no traffic. What if it's getting 10 visitors a month? Like, would there be what is the low point? Let's say you had 200 articles and, and the top 10 are getting the bulk of the traffic and then it tapers off. Where would you draw that line? Zero traffic, 10 a month, 100 a month? Like, how would you kind of analyze that?
Great question. And this is where SEO is a little bit complicated, and that it depends is such a common response in SEO because of the variability of the site. So if you have a local website and you're a plumber and you're getting 100 visitors per month and you've got a good conversion rate, you're getting new business coming in, 10 visitors for that website is great. So I would keep it. Yeah. But if you're getting 100, say 50,000 visitors to your website and you've got some pages doing 10, I would absolutely cut those. And I would probably go a lot deeper than that from a numbers perspective to cut it.
The other question is, you had mentioned, I'm going to go do this after this podcast. So hopefully people that are listening might go do the same thing. And so one thing you mentioned was to trim them, but not delete them. Maybe you add them back later. Maybe you trim them, go fix them, and then put it back onto the site later. Would you, instead of like going in and actually deleting that post, would you go in and make it non-visible to be indexed? And so then Google just won't see it, and then you could fix it and then go check that and make it active again? Or would you just delete the post?
If you can make it no index and make sure it's done correctly, then I would probably just make it inactive and then fix it and then repost it later, update the content and repost it later so it would show up as a new page. I guess the problem is some of the plugins and some, if you're doing it yourself and you're not really confident with the way you're doing it, Google has been known to still index that kind of content or keep track of it. And so I'm a big advocate of only giving Google the information I want it to have, and run into problems where you think it's inactive and it's actually not, so it's still being counted against you, kind of a situation. So as long as you're confident making it bulletproof that yes, this is inactive, Google is not indexing or crawling it, that's the big question.
Another one for any of the listeners that are putting content on their site and they're delving into SEO. We were hit with an update. I think it was an update in 23, maybe summerish, where we had dozens of our pages. In some cases, it was over 100 no indexed, and it was the reason in GSC. You can kind of dig into GSC and look in there, and it'll say indexed, no scan, or indexed. There's reasons why Google are not indexing these articles. There's a couple of them in there. We had hundreds on, and so we had to go in, manually look at them and see why didn't Google index them, and then force them to index again. Have you seen that, any of your clients? And how do you recommend, if Google scans it, it's that's what it is. It's scanned, no index, meaning they looked at it and they're like, nah, this is not good. How do you go and fix that to get them to index it?
So a lot of times, again, this is where it gets a little bit complicated, more into the weeds. It could be a number of factors that they used to find it credible, they don't anymore. There could be 3-on redirects in place that are essentially Google responds like, well, that's too deep. I'm not going to scan that. The link's broken in some way. So it just is a challenge for Google to index it. So I've seen Google a lot more proactive as far as flagging, hey, all of this content, we're not going to index it. Go figure out why. I like tools. When I first started working with my business partner, I think I used 6 or 7 different SEO tools. And, his response was to ask me if I needed counseling for my software addiction. So I'm all about proofing the data. I'm all about proofing the data. So if I've got multiple sources on all these third-party software, SEO softwares, a lot of them are projections. They do scan websites. They keep the top 10 pages of keyword projections. So they're saying, well, you might have 5,000 words you're ranking for on pages 4 through 10. But the reality is, a lot of those are not necessarily for sure. So they're kind of guessing. So if you can have other data to kind of validate what Google is telling you, that's something I always like to do. One of my favorite softwares is Screaming Frog. It's out of the UK. It's a fantastic software. They get all kinds of insights. And I've found holes. SEMrush scan tools, Ahrefs scan tools, they're not as solid as I would like them to be. And so if I can do 2 or 3 scans with the software, if it's really giving me problems, have another one that you can rely on that's solid is usually what I'm looking for. So I always look to validate the data first, make sure I've got a solid understanding of why I think this is the problem, and then I move forward with possible fixes.
Excellent. One last question, then I'll kick it over to David. Linking. This is a big topic in SEO world. And, if you're in e-commerce, like a lot of our listeners, putting content on your sites, you hear of linking. At a high level, can you explain what linking is and then maybe describe what you advise to clients on? We'll get a little bit even deeper, internal linking and external linking. And then what do you recommend on both of those?
So linking in its simplest form is simply one website with a hyperlink, that blue click here, linking to another website. The homepage, a page specifically within that website, but the two are essentially connected by that hyperlink. There's a couple things to look at. So we're talking external and internal. On the internal, you want to make sure your internal linking is done in a way that you can actually tell Google this page is really important. They call them pillar pages. Make sure this page is kind of a cornerstone of whether it be a service, whether it be a product. This is really important. And so any blog articles you create links back to that pillar page. That might be the page you make your actual sale on. You incentivize them to actually give you a call or whatever action you want them to take. You make that kind of a cornerstone. So you want to make sure your top navigation is built in a way that it makes that page focus and tells Google. If you think of Google's algorithm that it goes through and scans, it's all automated. And if you think of it in a way where you're like, okay, it is a 5-year-old with ADHD. What can you do to structure your site to make sure this page is this important to me? This page is second important, level of importance, third, fourth, and fifth, and really just make sure it is crystal clear. If Google finds your site, there's no way it can confuse you if you're selling stereos for Bluetooth headsets. Like, it's just one of those things to make sure it's crystal clear. That's kind of the interlinking. So the content is going to make sure that you link correctly with the correct in the link. So that's one thing that's also important, is understanding what keywords you're going for. And then as you create blog content or whatnot, that as you link back, you're using a number of different phrases, a few key phrases. You're linking back and say, this page, this important to me for these keywords. The navigation says it, the content says it, and your own internal linking says it. And then the external part of it is there's kind of 2 pieces here to be aware of. There's a backlink and there is a referring domain. So a backlink is essentially the same thing, a link from an external website pointing to your website. And again, it can link anywhere on your website. And then there's a referring domain. And the referring domain is a website pointing to your website. So we can get specific to a page of another website linking to your website, and there's actual website. The easiest way to explain it is if Facebook had a blog post about your website and it had 10 paragraphs. And it had a link in every single paragraph linked to your website. You would have 1 referring domain and you would have 10 backlinks, if that makes sense. So
Sure.
A lot of people will say, well, I've got hundreds or even thousands of backlinks, but they don't have very many referring domains, and the referring domains that are linking to them are not considered very trustworthy. The backlinks themselves aren't really going to do very much. It used to be. And the reason for why it's not as important anymore is the hackers, spammers, whatever you want to call them, realized that a lot of Google's ranking algorithm was based on the number of not referring domains, but of backlink. And so what they would do is they would go to a website that had maybe 1,000 pages of content. And they would say, hey, add this link to every single page on your website. And overnight, they would have 1,000 backlinks and they would have one referring domain. And so it was a very easy way. If you get 10 websites like that, all of a sudden within a week, you've got 10,000 backlinks and you're killing it. You're at the top of the rankings, everything, and your website might actually kind of suck. And so Google's way of combating that was saying, you know what? Referring domains is more difficult to get than just a backlink, especially if it's going to be a credible referring domain. And so their focus is more on building the trust factor, the quality assurance that your website is legitimate is kind of a vote from other websites. So the more websites you have pointing to your website that you are legitimate, you're good, your trust factor goes up. And that's when we get into domain authority rankings and those kinds of things. If your website's brand new, you probably have a trust factor of 0, as opposed to a good referring domain might be a trust factor of 40 or 50. No, all the softwares out there, they have their own ranking and how that they gauge a website, whether it's trustworthy or not. It's usually a scale of 0 to 100. Trustworthy is usually somewhere in the 40 to 60 range is a good place to be. And then higher you get, you're considered more of an authority.
Awesome. Thanks for taking that hike down into the weeds with us. Climb back out of the weeds, David. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we prep for this interview, I was probably the most excited for this question. So to set it up, typically, me, Ken, any of our listeners, they will pick a product and then they'll build a marketing plan around that product. One unique perspective that you have is you get to work with a lot of different brands and see a lot of different types of products. And if we were to reverse engineer that, if you were to come up with a rock solid marketing and then build a product around, are there any characteristics that stand out to you? And that may be price point, that may be the type of product, it might be size, but generally, what types of products tend to lend themselves to being easier to market?
That is a fantastic question. So let me see if I can answer that a little more succinctly. I'm not going to say it depends, but it does have a huge impact in what channel you want to have the biggest impact. So the reason I say that is SEO and Google Ads, two very strong channels. SEO is going to be your highest ROI. If it's a new product and no one knows anything about it, you could have the best content in the world and you could be ranking #1, but no one's searching for it. So you're not going to generate any sales whatsoever. If you're going to focus on TikTok, Facebook, where it's more of an interruptive media, so they're doing something else, you can get in front of them and say, hey, check out how cool our product is. All of a sudden, if it's a new product, you have to build the awareness to have people actually start to seek it out and potentially make your sales. The way in which you wanted to approach that is going to have a huge impact on the kind of marketing plan you wanted to have. People say, well, it needs to be branding or whatnot. Branding would definitely be part of it, but just an awareness that you actually exist. And the biggest mistake people make is, hey, I've got this amazing product. They do a Facebook campaign because they understand, okay, people don't know I'm here. I'm going to get their attention. And they approach it from the standpoint of, hey, buy this, it's 50% off. And no one's ever heard of it. They essentially respond, what is this? Why am I being spammed with this garbage? And then they block your ad. So you have to understand that even with Facebook on a campaign like that, if you want to do that, you have to be able to explain, hey, this super cool feature, do you have this problem? Speak to their pain point and have a flow. They call it a funnel. So a Facebook funnel, explaining the problem they might have, your solution, and then kind of get them familiar with you, your brand, and then look for the sale after they're aware you're there and that you could actually solve a problem for them.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And this is something that comes up with a lot of newer entrepreneurs, where they'll have a new idea for a new type of product that there's not necessarily a keyword attached to this. I made that mistake. I put a CPA study guide on a mug. Turns out no one searches for that ever. I've got 200 of those in my basement. When somebody's thinking of a product, if they have two avenues to go down, hey, I'm going to make an improvement on an existing type of product that people know and search for, or I'm going to invent a new space or a new product, doesn't necessarily have new keywords to describe it. And you give advice to that entrepreneur that's in those crossroads.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of that's just going to be understanding the obstacles in order to accomplish each one of those. Just knowing what you're up against and being prepared for that. So if you got a brand new product, awesome. The potential for the upside is huge. It's way bigger than just maybe repurposing a product, but understanding you've got to make them aware of it. You've got to have multiple channels working. You're going to take longer to be able to start making your initial sales because it's something brand new. Once it takes off, you could be off to the races. and then you've got the actual kind of repurpose this product. That one, as far as making it successful, is probably going to take a lot less effort than something brand new. But again, part of it depends on what it is and who you're marketing it to. A simple one, I'm sure you guys have seen it, deodorant. Not that exciting, not that big a deal. Dr. Squatch essentially kind of repurposed deodorant, made it their own, but there's nothing new about deodorant. And all of a sudden, it went from 2 or 3 million in sales with a good marketing campaign, got some traction, and now they're doing 300 or 400 million right now. So just absolutely skyrocketed. So understanding, I guess, what it is you're trying to accomplish, and then really also being aware of what your constraints are as far as your marketing campaign and how much money you can put into it. So if I wanted something that really I needed to bring awareness to, I feel like one of the best combinations would be an awareness campaign, Facebook and TikTok. Get those running, have your website built, and have a good SEO campaign to start with your branded terms. Understanding how the channels work together is going to be critical. And this is where people make the biggest mistake, is they'll be running a Facebook campaign and they'll be tracking. I love tracking, but not understanding all the complexities of the tracking can definitely shoot yourself in the foot. They're tracking and they're saying, well, all of my sales are coming from SEO. I must be killing with SEO, so I'm going to shut off my Facebook campaign because I'm pumping all this money into it and I'm not getting any sales. If you go a little bit deeper into your tracking, you'll find that the actual sales were being generated by your Facebook campaign. Facebook has a much lower trust factor than Google does. And so a lot of people will look at that, especially with a new product, a brand they haven't heard before. Like, is this guy legit, or is it something out of China that some spammers hit me with? They will then Google your name, go through Google if you're ranked organically for your brand name. They're like, okay, they're legit. They go to your website and then they buy from your website, assuming the pricing's the same. All of a sudden, your organic is killing it. And the truth is, your Facebook was the one actually driving the traffic to your organic to make the sale.
That is a really, when you said that, I had an aha moment of how to look at those two traffic sources. I really like that.
Yeah, for sure. So that's a really interesting point when, you have an omni-channel company and you're selling on multiple channels, and then you're tracking, or you're doing some kind of a higher level tracking on to see where your sales are coming in from. And now that, Amazon is more of a product search, marketplace, Google, same thing. And so they might check 2 or 3 things and to try to trust you and then go to your site and buy it. But they got in from a TikTok ad or whatever. And so that's interesting. And also you've got the, like I call it the billionaire battle, where you have the Zuckerbergs and all these guys blocking each other from looking through and tracking all that stuff. There was a big Facebook debacle last year where they stopped tracking and all that. And so, yeah, it's interesting to not make too many rash decisions on, I'm getting all my stuff from Google, so I'll shut off the Facebook or TikTok. And well, then if at least then you could also say, I just lost 20% of my traffic. Well, guess what? Turn that back on, it comes back, and now 20% is coming from there. And so just kind of wanted to reiterate that. My next question is, it's kind of related, it's Google ads. So we'll talk about that it's been around for a very long time. And so a specific question is for e-commerce sellers. Say we're selling products that are in that $9.99. We'll just say deodorant. You brought it up earlier. And so deodorant. So you got a product that's $10 for deodorant or $14.99, and you want to market that on Google. Let's say a small business has that. They don't have much SEO. They don't have a big branding name. They want to go on Google Ads and they want to drive traffic to their website for a $14.99 product. Now the click, say their margins are 30%, 40%. Maybe the keyword clicks are they're battling with the big players in that, and the keyword clicks are $3 or $4 or something to get that click over. Have you seen clients can you be successful like that? And what can you do to, if you do have the $9.99 product, the $14.99 product, what can you do to be successful and run Google ads, like upsells, email marketing? What is can you describe a little bit of how to be successful with a product that's $9.99 or $14.99, or is it just not a good idea to run Google ads?
Great question. So starting, it really depends on the competition. And the reason I say that is because Google Ads is auction-based. And so the more competitors you have, the more expensive the clicks are. That's going to have an immediate impact. So understanding what your average cost per click is going to be, the starting point. Bear Fox, I really saw a lot of agencies out there and what their business practice was, and I did not want to follow suit. Bear Fox we start with a consultative approach. There's a lot of services we could offer, but if we don't think we can make you successful, we won't take the business. And so on the bearfoxmarketing.com website, we actually have 3 calculators on there to help you know your numbers, whether it be SEO, whether it be pay-per-click, where you can go on there and actually see, okay, this is my cost per click. This is my conversion rate. And then also understand the other numbers. Those are the initial kind of costs you're going to incur. But what is your average order value? Might be selling something for $14.99, but do you sell 3 of them? And all of a sudden, it's much more profitable at 3 than it was for 1. Do you have some upsells you can do to increase that average order value? Do you have something maybe at $14.99 you can hook them, but then you've got a much better offer down the road that you can get them to upsell? And then how many times do they buy from you? And all of a sudden, if they buy 5 or 6 times and they're buying 3 or 4 products at a time, all of a sudden, Google Ads is very much a profitable marketing channel you can go after. But the biggest thing, I feel like fear gets in the way, and a lot of the fear can be controlled by understanding your numbers and just making sure that they're crystal clear of. It doesn't have to be complicated. Just understanding, as long as you're tracking, you have any kind of track record, you can look at that and say, yes, this is the cost per click I'm expecting to get. The conversion rate is this. Our sales numbers are this, average order value is this, and the customer lifetime value is this. So really understanding, I say 5 or 6 metrics around what you're trying to accomplish with that product can answer that question. And so that's one thing we actually walk them through. Any client we take on, we actually walk them through that calculator to show them that this is what we are working with. This is what we think we can make happen. This is what your competitors are doing. This is what you can expect to get. Do you need to have a 3 times ROI to cover your costs? Do you need to have a 10 times? Where are you at in your needs to make it successful? And just understanding what that number is.
That's kind of like a reality checker. Before you dip your toe in, before you jump in, let's dip your toe and see where you're sitting. So I like that.
One other question that I have is for a particular product. Ken and I are a big fan of the 80-20 rule. In fact, our company is called 80-20 Capital. How many keywords drive 80% of traffic for a particular product? If someone said, I want to focus on my most important keywords, generally, how many keywords is that? Is it 5, 10? Is it 100?
Great question. So I would say, depending on what you want from the traffic, if you're looking for traffic or you're looking for revenue from the traffic, is going to be the big differentiator. So a short keyword phrase oftentimes will generate the most traffic and the least amount of sales. When you go in and make sure you have the tracking correctly, you can actually see that all this traffic makes up 60% of our total traffic, and it makes up 0.15% of our sales, our actual conversions. I'm not even kidding. And then when I looked at the other pages that were converting, the traffic was longer, so the keywords were longer. The traffic didn't make up nearly as much. So they're top, 50 pages off of 18% of traffic. And so really understanding, do you want traffic or do you want revenue? What is that end goal? And then work backwards from there to understand what keywords you're looking for to generate the actual revenue, or maybe you just want eyeballs and be competitive. But that's where I would start, is really understanding what you want from the traffic you want to get.
If you want revenue, and I'm thinking of this through the lens of Google AdWords. If someone wanted to dip their toe in the water and say, I'm going to focus on these 10 long tail keywords or these 100 long tail keywords, or what would the scope of that be? And I know it depends on the product, but is there a general rule you can?
Yeah, I would definitely say you're going to be probably 20% of those keywords are really going to be the ones driving your sales, and understanding what those are, make sure you've got the tracking in place. But I would say definitely a minority are going to be the ones that are going to convert. And there's one thing to be aware of is understanding that it's going to take multiple touches to get the conversion. And so the the short length keywords are going to be important to also have some ranking for that. But people get frustrated. They're like, well, they clicked on my ad, they went to my website, where are my conversions? Statistically speaking, you should expect 6 to 8 touches off of every visitor before they actually convert.
I want to expand on that one before we get into the fire round. So that's a really good point, Bear, that you make. I've heard that so many times. I've heard 7 touch points is what you can expect before conversion. And so, it's the know, like, and trust. What is your, let's say you bring a new client in-house and do all the research, onboard them, and then as it starts, so they have hey, my budget is X amount of dollars, and the first month it comes in and their ROAS is way lower than what they wanted. It's like, well, we have to kind of build this machine and get it moving. And so, especially if you're selling a higher ticket item, right, that they have to know, like, and trust you before they convert. And so what is your, I guess, advice to people that are just starting and like pay-per-click, or, when they have a smaller budget and it's not converting as, it's not like you hit the road, day one and you exchange $1 for $3. There's like a gradual, grind. So what's your advice, or what would you like to share on that?
Excellent question. It's difficult because if you're doing it yourself, you're not a marketing expert. And so you're kind of blind guessing a little bit. You might have some experience in it. If you had someone, maybe a team member or someone you could pay a certain fee to, that knew what they were doing and had a lot of confidence, like, no, this is the ramp up period. We're doing this, and this, and they've seen it before. They've done it before for you or for someone else. They know exactly what they're getting into, and they can kind of guide you, like, yeah, this was expected. I'm expecting it to start ramping up at this point and this point. And if you don't have that kind of experience in running something like that, the truth of the matter is you might be cutting it off too soon. Or if it runs, you might let it run way too long, and you're just throwing good money after bad money because you legitimately don't know. So if you wanted to take it over, you could. I would say it would be a really smart investment to pay someone to set it up correctly, get it going, and then you could in-house it or something like that. But to just start it yourself with no real experience, you're kind of playing with fire, whether or not you make the right call or not.
Last question before we get into the fire round. Can you tell us a little bit more about Bear Fox Marketing and what type of clients you work with?
Yeah, so we do a lot of work with, I wouldn't say blue collar industry, but a lot of roofing companies, fencing companies. We do work with some of the larger companies. We work with consumer packaged good companies. So it kind of depends as far as what their goals are. We don't do a lot of, we've had some great success with software companies, SaaS companies as well. I'd say probably 60% of our business is more of the blue collar, so construction companies, those kinds of things. And then we got the other 40% are SaaS companies. We have worked with a great relationship, Acton ADU out in California. We worked with them for like 4 years, helped them grow that construction company for accessory dwelling units, backyard. But yeah, that's really primarily who we work with.
So Bear, every guest we get on the show, we run them through the ringer. It's called the fire round. It's a 4 rapid fire questions. They're very easy. Are you ready?
Okay, ready.
What is your favorite book?
10X is Easier Than 2X by Benjamin Hardy.
What are your hobbies?
I would say exercising, weightlifting, and reading.
What is one thing that you do not miss about working for the man?
Punching a clock.
I agree. All right, last one. What do you think sets apart successful entrepreneurs from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
I would say endurance. One of my favorite quotes from Ernest Shackleton, the explorer on the South Pole. His founding motto was, by endurance, we conquer.
I love that quote. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Bear, I want to thank you for being a guest on the Firing the Man podcast. If people are interested in working with Bear Fox Marketing, what would be the best way?
Just go to bearfoxmarketing.com. We've got some forms on there you can submit, and we will reach out to you. We always do the consultative approach, so no worries about any slick salesmen talking to you. Just want to see if we can legitimately help you and point you in the right direction.
Awesome. Very nice. And we'll post links to all that in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time today, and we're looking forward to staying in touch.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Thanks for watching this video. If you got some value out of this, would you please hit the like and subscribe button? This is a free way to support the show, and it really helps us build our audience.